Just two. All right. Amy, I'll make the motion.
Yeah. It's always you, Brett. Yeah. Joey's going to volunteer himself.
Let's make Amy. I'm going to vote no. Can we make Amy?
I just sit here and don't talk, so.
We need you to talk.
You guys are awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Call to order. We had another recent passing this week, so I'd like to dedicate our moment of silence to Joey Sandhouse, or Sandhouse, however you pronounce it. I apologize if I pronounced it wrong. GHS student that tragically passed away this week. If you could join me in a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With the village president absent, excused, I'd like to make a motion for Trustee Gerger to chair the village board meeting.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Me? Ayes have it. Okay, roll call.
Trustee Mann.
Here.
Trustee Gerger.
Present.
Trustee Charo.
Present.
Trustee Detmers.
Here.
Trustee Mao. Trustee Churchill.
Present.
Village President Kimsey.
Both President Kinsey and President Mao called and said they were unable to make it because of work.
You mean Trustee Mao?
Did I say?
President Mao just got elected.
Co-presidents.
Glad you caught that.
So, do we have any public announcements? Les?
You've been in for February 28th, fish fries start.
Yay.
Les Morgan.
Esquire.
Fish fries.
Fish fries then for the next 6 or 7 weeks, however many it takes.
Through Lent.
Till Good Friday. Yeah.
Thank you. Public comments on agenda topics? Do we have anybody signed up?
No.
Negative. Can I have a motion to bring the consent agenda forward?
I'll make that motion.
Trustee Detmers,
I'll second.
second by Trustee Charo.
There you go.
Close second. Any discussion on the minutes or the warrants?
Both look fine to me.
Everyone else, all right? Hearing none except for both for fine to Dewey. Roll.
Trustee Mann.
Yes.
Trustee Gerger.
Yes.
Trustee Charo.
Yes.
Trustee Detmers.
Yes.
Trustee Churchill.
Yes.
Old business customer service manual.
Customer Service Manual. We discussed that last night at the Utilities Oversight Committee. We have that on the board docs. Do that one right there. We updated the areas that we discussed. We wanted to make sure that people, Dewey had asked for a notification system. We found that our Springbrook software works with our new phone automation system. So what we can do is it goes through, they run a report, and it will send a voice notification to all the customers that are in danger of being shut off for non-payment. We will send that out roughly on the day after the 5-day grace period is over. If that's on a Saturday or Sunday, we'll do it on the Monday after that. And then that will let them know. And that also steps them through so they can go and make the payment right there. So when they get the message, it'll go through a system and allow them to make the payment right then. Or if no one answers and goes to an answering machine, it will give them that option and tell them if you dial this number back and steps them through that option there.
To make a payment through the phone.
Yes. The other thing that we were able to do is we added on there that we will do no shut-offs on Fridays or any village observed holidays. So those have been updated 3 different places, and they're in red on that. And I think we've been through it enough. I think we'd like to be able to have Greg put together an ordinance so that we can adopt that at the last meeting in February, with the idea that we would start this manual May 1st.
So the other thing we talked about last night too was a robust communication effort to make sure the village has updated phone numbers, because that's how you're going to be notified of the shut off. So through the bill and maybe bold print saying, please update your phone number with the village office, just so people, I know people are still probably going to miss it. They'll get shut off and then they'll update their phone number, and we won't have that going forward.
But call the office. The girls are prepared. I've told them that starting today, any communications with any of our customers, ask them to give them whatever their latest and greatest phone number is so they can update it in the system.
Appreciate you guys working through that. I think it's important for the consumers.
I don't know if you saw that, Dewey. There is a cost to it.
Yeah, we talked about it this afternoon, and
Okay.
I think that cost is reasonable given, the number of calls that we make, and I assume that number of calls will decline as the system is
I hope.
implemented.
So can we get a recommendation from this committee to put it on the agenda at the next meeting?
Yeah, I would be for putting it on the agenda.
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Yep.
Yep.
Good.
All right. Great.
So Greg, do your magic.
I will.
Thank you.
And if anybody from the public still wants to look at it, it will be on board docs. It'll be available in tonight's meeting under customer service manual under old business. So,
All right. Thank you. Next, new business. Resolution accepting the lowest responsible bid for the 2500 HD crew cab pickup truck or its equivalent. Can I have a motion to bring this to the table?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Trustee Detmer, seconded by Trustee Mann. Discussion?
any questions on that? That
So
that
this
truck
is
was
what-
in the budget. It was for the electric department. The bid come in lower than what we had originally had estimated in the budget. It's a Dodge 2019, 2022 2500 HD crew cab, four-wheel drive. That price was,
29,341. That's the one question I have, is that the bid says 29,341 plus fees and, it says plus
This document and license fees.
document and license fees. So when comparing that to Friendly, for instance, I don't know what those doc and license fees are. But Friendly says it's 34,500 all in. And I don't know what Freedom's all-in number is. I assume the fees aren't $5,000, but
Do we know?
the ordinance says 29,341. I don't know if it's normal for the ordinance not to include the doc and license fees, but I would assume that
It should
we would want
include
the
final
all-in number.
price.
It says a total cost of 29.
Yeah.
that's what I think it is.
Well, I'm
With
just reading the summary here that it's the packet. What's it called? The docket. Hold on. The name of it is the file is called the bid binder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the bid binder, on page 3, 4 summarizes the bids that were received, and it states Freedom Auto is 29,341 plus doc and license fee.
Does that mean including?
And then again at the bottom, it says 29,341 plus fees.
Yeah,
So I would think you'd have to add that in.
yeah, the way the language is in the ordinances says total cost. with it, so it's inclusive of the fees, the way it's worded in the
Right.
ordinance. Right.
I just think
see
they're
bid.
in
Yeah, I
conflict
see.
with one another, that's all
Right.
I'm saying.
Yep.
So I would imagine if we do okay this ordinance, that they're going to not be happy because they're not going to be paid license and fees.
Unless it's supposed to say including
I think
on
it
the,
means
on the
including.
bid binder.
I mean, that's how I interpreted it. Otherwise, they might not be happy.
I missed that when I looked at that. I sent it to Greg to write the ordinance, so.
Nope, no problem. I think we can alter it or edit it. I just, in comparing the numbers, I didn't think I could make a fair comparison because I don't know what the fees are.
Well, what I think we're approving is the 29 number.
That's the
Right,
number
but
you were
that
approving.
assumes that that's the lowest bid. That's
And
what
that
I'm
may
saying.
not buy the truck. According to that bid, it wouldn't buy the truck.
You want to postpone it? It doesn't have to be bought tonight. I can get a clarification.
I think it would be helpful to get a clarification of what the dock and license fees are, and then compare that to the friendly bid, which had the all-in number.
All right.
I assume it will still be lower.
Right.
Well, let's be sure.
Thank you.
So I have a motion to table this to next meeting.
I'll make a motion to table.
I'll second.
Okay. Trustee Detmers, trustee Mann. Roll.
Trustee Mann.
Yes.
Trustee Gerger.
Yes.
Trustee Charo.
Yes.
Trustee Detmers.
Yes.
Trustee Churchill.
Yes.
Sorry, Pat.
Well, that's all right.
But yeah, they would have been mad at you only written them a check for 29.
I will say that's one hell of a price. It's a $50,000 truck for
Yes.
Yeah.
30,000.
Yeah.
All right, do we have any public comments on village business? We got 4 minutes. Anybody wants to talk about anything? Okay. Schedule of meetings, Planning Commission, 6 PM, February 20th. Village Board, 6 PM, February 25th. Village Board, March 10th, 2020. Committee of the Whole, Municipal Hall, March 10th. Utility Oversight Subcommittee meeting, April 13th, 2020. Do we have any reason for closed session?
Not that I know of.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Trustee Charles, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Trustee Mann, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. We will convene at 6:15.
I know.
If you didn't pull a muscle.
Did you get your email working? Okay. I'm about to add mine on my iPad. I just know if you want to.
I shut it off. I deleted the account, shut it off. I don't know. Turned around twice and it
Hold your breath the whole time.
Is this the presentation?
Mom?
He doesn't know. Huh?
Chloramine?
He just, they did tell Dustin that it was going to be at the end of the month. But they didn't say what month. So it's just kind of like they were going to do it, have it last December, but they didn't say which December either.
Aye.
So and I don't have.
So we're back to
as much. You do yours.
Yep.
And then this, that shouldn't have been put on there. Ryan put that on there. I said, well, it's got to go through the planning commission before it comes here. So,
I'll bring it up and say this needs to go to the planning commission.
yeah, so that's pretty much all we got there.
Okay.
And then, your update from us.
Yep.
We have the presentation from Massey and Massey tonight.
Parks, yep. Should be good.
Yeah, they have to move to the planning commission first. But Ryan added it.
Joe, the one for,
Because that man is a loose cannon, if anything, didn't care.
that, and then you click on the attachment, it'll ask you to down to the bottom. It's a little different than the other ones. Okay. Then would you double click on that?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a PowerPoint. Ding.
We good? All right. Call to order. Roll call.
Trustee Mann.
Here.
Trustee Gerger.
Present.
Trustee Charo.
Present.
Trustee Detmers.
Here.
Trustee Churchill.
Present.
Any public comments on agenda topics for committee of the whole? Do I have a motion to bring the consent agenda forward?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Trustee Detmers, seconded by Trustee Charo. Discussion on the minutes?
Redwall.
Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Ayes have it. Old business update of the Parks Comprehensive Report. We have Kent Massey here tonight to present that. Mr. Massey?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm sure you've all read this word for word.
I have.
I know Judy has.
And he has edits.
He did all the spell check on it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We appreciate that. All right, we send out draft reports, and that's one of the reasons that one went out before we had totally.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Um,
That isn't a PDF.
oh, it isn't.
The next one is.
First, I wanted to say that the comprehensive plan that we did is really a 10 to 20-year vision, and it's only a tool. Don't take it as the new Bible for Chatham or anything like that.
It's too late. Dewey already has.
Well, in that case, we will call him priest.
Yeah.
But no, it's really a tool for the village board to make decisions through the way, but also for community groups and everybody to look at this in a very broad sense. I want to emphasize broad sense. As far as that go, it's a kind of a way that we encourage community involvement between the community and the city, village government in this case. And it's also a great tool for applying for funds, as you'll find out if you go for any kind of state or federal funds. It also helps with any kind of bequests that may come up in a community. Excuse me. That's what you get for eating dinner right before you come. The basis of this, we did quite an in-depth analysis of your existing parks and programs and so on. We also assessed the community needs, and then we looked at it even a broader picture of how Chatham fits into the overall region and some of the national trends that are going on right now, and so on. As I said, the plan is basically a document. It can be used in several different ways, and I wanted to kind of summarize it by, if you look at the goals in there, those are kind of the 5 principles that I think this document can be used for. The first one is to provide great parks and recreation. It sounds like that's the majority of the plan, which it is. But in that, we're looking at existing parks, how to expand those parks, and maybe even new parks in areas beyond that. The second thing was to look at a comprehensive trails and greenways. And you have a little bit of that right now. You have the spine of it, I'll say, but a lot of the parks and other areas really aren't connected. And this becomes kind of a tool that you use to look in the future as far as those connections. The third thing I want to go into is stewardship of the land. This sounds rather altruistic, but it's a pretty important ingredient as you go forward as far as looking at how to improve the aesthetics of the community, water quality, air quality, and so on. and I'll mention that in other ways later. Fourth item was cooperation. I think this, needless to say, is cooperation of the village with all the volunteer groups in this town, plus also the village with the school district and with CWLP, which is one of the main land management companies here in the area. And then the fifth is really this encouragement of community enhancement. And I look at that as far as economic development. I think a lot of you can understand that as far as if you have a good parks and open space and enhance quality of life, you actually improve it as far as attracting more people to reside in the community, you attract businesses to the community, and so on. This is one of the things that Central Illinois is suffering from right now, is this idea that community pride can really increase population and business, and therefore tax revenue, and other things to a community. So this kind of gives some principles to that, which I think Chatham falls into a nice category with. I don't want to go into a lot of detail here. We can, if you want, on some of the areas, but some of the takeaways, I'll put it, that I would share with you as the trustees are, Chatham's okay. You're okay as far as if you apply the number of acres and facilities you have per population. I would say you're just okay. You just hit that. It doesn't look at anything in the future and so on. You're just kind of at this even par, which I think for most people in Chatham, they feel you'd like to be a little bit above par instead of right at that. So what we kind of see is some issues right now in Chatham, and I'll just briefly say, is that you have a nice community park, but you have too many activities concentrated in that one facility. And the facility and a lot of your others aren't very accessible to the population here without getting in a car and driving to them. So I think one of the things we would highly recommend, and it appears in the plan several places, is kind of a disbursement of some of this recreation and open space. And what we addressed here is expansion of every one of the sites. We even went into a little bit of detail, more than I typically do, on plans, as far as indicating where you could possibly expand. It doesn't mean you have to expand that way or that much, but it just shows that each of the sites has the potential for a little bit of expansion just there. And then we also address, I think, 4 new community areas beyond that, which fall into the, what I call the perimeter of where growth could be in the future. So we tried to address that in a 20-year perspective so that you can look at it as far as land acquisition, setting aside money for development, maintenance, possibly expansion. The other thing is this potential for making Chatham really attractive. I refer to it, having lived in the area for 40 years, as Chatham sits on the lake. Now, most of you may not think of yourselves as the village on the lake, but I think a lot of people around here do. So I think that's an attribute that could be enhanced even more. Right now, you're a community that, in my opinion, is a small town that's gotten to be a big kind of suburb, with sometimes not a lot of consideration to how that happened. And I'm not finding fault with anything. But that's just how our community grows. And then it sort of looks back on itself. Did we grow right? And how can we mend those areas that maybe didn't grow right? And I think you can see it here in Chatham, where you have the old village part in the center, and then the different suburbs and subdivisions that are encroached around it. So I hope that this plan kind of provides some overall coordination on how that might be done. I know it ties together with the comprehensive plan that's being done right now. I wanted to illustrate that we did cooperate with the Sangamon County Regional Planning Office on that, so that some of the things they're projecting is the far future of Chatham is reflected in this plan. So with that, I just like to end it that I think Chatham is a very family-oriented community that will continue to grow that way. But don't forget the seniors in this town and the middle-aged people in this town and somewhat the tots. I think you put a lot of emphasis on those youth that are in school, but really there's this other population that exists. Don't forget those people. And I think we addressed that pretty well in the plan as far as ideas. Going forth from here, obviously, it's a commitment of money, both money for acquisition and development. In the future, I encourage you to look at various means of that, whether it's applying for grants or bonding or whatever it may take. I would highly encourage looking at some land acquisition, even if it sits for a few years in anticipation of growth, but be there in a proactive sense versus okay, we'll take your leftover ditch and possibly try to do something with that. Maybe be a little more proactive in looking at the future. I know that's hard to do, especially for a smaller community with a limited budget. But it's something that I think is important. And please don't forget programming and maintenance. You can build great facilities, but if you don't have anybody to program them, and you don't have anybody to maintain them or the money to, they're not so great. So anything on that, positive note back there. I think you have a great opportunity, and you're probably the envy of every community in Sangamon County as far as that goes. So it's a pleasure to work on it. Open for any questions.
I thank you for the work you put into it. It's really a good blueprint from what I've read.
Yeah, I mean, it's appreciated because I was looking through again today, like the back section where you line out the priorities like A, B, C, and I think it will be difficult for us because we've talked about that, and Trustee Detmers has asked us to think about how we prioritize even within those priorities. Because I mean, as you said, you've got acquisitions of land and then also the maintenance and things that are already existing. But it's helpful to have this to refer to as we put that program together.
It's good justification when you go after grants or even an organization, a civic organization may come forth and say, we want to do something, how does it fit in the best? Instead of concentrating, please don't concentrate everything in the community park south. Look at some of the other areas in town.
Well, and I don't know how specific you want to get in the plan, but there's been like one issue with the dog park and where that's placed. How common, uncommon is it to have it in an area that's by a neighborhood, or in the thinking that went into the location of where it's at?
Okay, in communities outside of this area, general area, and I know Springfield has worked because I was in the middle of this battle in Springfield, and they decided to put it way out in kind of a remote area. And a lot of people won't use that because it is so remote. And even if you have a big dog to protect you, it's still very remote. Most communities, they have them right in neighborhoods. My daughter lived in California, and of course, California's California, but they were in almost every neighborhood park. There was some area where there was a leash-free area for dogs, and they weren't very big. They were pretty small areas, but there was a place that they could go. Of course, they also had doggy bag dispensers on every street corner almost for the use and the disposal of that. But I think this is becoming a big topic in everywhere because now I notice about every time I go to Menards or Lowe's, somebody's in there with their dog. Dogs are welcome to certain restaurants, grocery stores even, and so on. So in planes, oh my gosh, that's getting a little ridiculous there. But the acceptance of pets, and I think if they are in a controlled situation where people, the owners, whether they're walking the dogs or off on a small unleashed area, that's part of our makeup right now. And there's there's a population that expects that now. I guess that's the other thing that I'm trying to say. Some of the national trends right now, they're extremely popular. And I think you can go to Decatur and Bloomington and some of the other communities, and you see that these are centrally located and almost in very visible locations so that people do feel safe. And it's not just for the animals. They are a recreation. They bring people together. The dog owners talk to each other. It's kind of a community in itself. No different than going somewhat to a baseball game and all the parents are sitting there, conversing and communicating. People do that instead of kids. They're dogs. Does that answer your question? I'm expecting in Springfield there will be 2 or 3, coming up in probably the near future, either on Park District land or others. And in most cases, they do not encourage a lot of barking. In fact, it's just the opposite. The dogs are more free to play with other dogs, or they're under the owner's control. So the dog parks I've been around, the dogs are sniffing more than they are barking. But they and the owners are more cooperative because most people know that that's they're not going to have Beefy or Sugar Bear or something like that chewed up by Bully. I'm making up names. I'm sorry.
So the other question I would have for you, Pat, do we have would it be Dustin's role to look for grants or pursue funding?
That's what our plan was, that once we got this, when we tried to fill out I think it's Osselin grant, is that what it's
Right, Osselin, yeah. Right.
Yeah, and the gal at the state, when Dustin called to talk to her, said, how old do you have a park comprehensive plan? He goes, well, yeah. She said, how old? And he goes, 20 years old. She goes, well, I wouldn't waste my time filling out a grant application until you had an updated park comprehensive plan.
Okay.
So we knew we needed this to get the ball rolling. Dustin is not an experienced grant writer. He will most likely be an experienced grant writer by the time it's easier done. But luckily, Paul told me that he is an experienced grant writer, so maybe he can sit with me and Dustin and give us some guidance, or at least critique our stuff as we put it together to be able to see whether we're on the mark or not.
We can help with that too, to a degree. And really, it used to be such a great program, and then it kind of went on hiatus here in the state. And the state couldn't pass a budget and therefore didn't have the match for the federals. And now we have kind of this weird situation with the federal government and knowing what's coming down the pike that way. But in the past year, 2 years, I guess now, the grant program is all of a sudden reactivated. And I think Springfield just got a rather large one for Springfield Park District did for one. So they're coming back. They're for a few years of this dead in the water.
Yeah.
I would highly encourage that. And I think you were going after one for some watershed protection. Another very popular area right now. Anything that has to do with watershed, water improvements, and so on. There are monies allocated for that. And I do know that Lake Springfield is looking for projects to improve the watershed of Lake Springfield, and they will fund or get some federal monies to help fund.
And we've had discussions with them, and they have come forward and said they would help us on whatever we need to be able to do. We have 2 waterways that lead into Lake Springfield, and whatever we can do to turn around and keep the silt and the runoff from going in, they're appreciative. So
Right.
That's why when you look at these where we used to shave everything down right near a creek, really we need to look at planting the right grasses and stuff and leaving the natural grasses in those areas so that it can filter all the silt and bring, animals in those areas back and stuff.
Right.
We can still have a beautiful park to be able to play softball and baseball and soccer, football in, but we can also have a nice natural area that cuts through it that when you look at it, you go, man, this is a beautiful park, instead of, man, this is a great sports park.
And part of that will help with the flooding situation. I know you've already taken a few houses because of flooding, but all of that is fundable and is now more logical. And I think all your tributaries here in town go into Lake Springfield pretty directly. So I think there's cooperation. One of the things I did want to point out when we talk about cooperation is we are suggesting here a rather large area, if you noticed, up by the high school that is on CWLP lands. And part of the thinking there is that's land where they took the silt deposits out of the lake and put them several years ago. It's not constructible for anything. They simply farm it. And they know that there are farming areas that they shouldn't even be farming and setting aside. So I would highly recommend, no, you don't sometimes get along real well with CWLP, but try to throw out an olive branch there, because I think that might be a good use for what I kept hearing was a lack of practice fields and so on. And if you could just take some of that out of crop production and work out an agreement with the city, it could be a very low-cost way of really getting a lot of open green space just for nothing other than athletic fields. So no, I'm talking about athletic fields. I'm talking movable things, and no grandstands, no stadiums, and stuff like that, but more just an open play area, which for those people now who, we're into drone flying and other kinds of contests and stuff like that, that would be a nice area out there by itself, wide open, that might be a potential. And they have, 300 and some acres in that general area. So, we're not saying take all of it, but it would be, a nice cushion that maybe the village wouldn't have to buy lands for that. And also working out cooperative ventures with the school district. I think that's really important. It's sad to see nice facilities sitting idle while other facilities, there's a backlog to get onto the field. So.
Just to back up just a second, speaking of Dustin, I'm concerned about him, and he's going to, there's so much that can be done or could be done. I'm just concerned that we're going to be pushing him pretty thin, and
Especially all the grants you're going to write.
But the thing is it still falls back to cash. You could get a grant for $2 million, and if you need to come up with 10%.
Right.
So we still have to work with our civic groups. Really look at it. Soccer helped build the soccer fields, football built the football fields, baseball built the baseball fields. The pickleball people turn around and spend a good money of their own funds to be able to get the pickleball courts up. That's the way that we need to be able to keep approaching this, unless the village is to the point where they think a park district needs to step in, and you have a taxing body that is specifically for parks and specifically for, that big ticket item, whether it be that pool or something like that.
Right.
But that's something that this board can't form. Somebody outside of our organization needs to put that grassroots group together and then turn around and try to get it on a ballot to see if they can get it passed. But for right now, we're going to try our best, and we'll go forward from there. But
you're on the right track. In terms of being a competitive grant proposal, having a matching component to it is important, but it doesn't have to be your funds. It's even more competitive if you have other groups, because it shows more collaboration, which makes it even more competitive. But I think.
And the other thing that needs to be pointed out with most of these grants, the village has to be able to put all the money up front, which for some smaller communities is a difficult thing to do, waiting for the reimbursement once the project's done. So you have to keep that in mind too.
From a state or a federal agency.
Right, from a state or federal agency. But I'm in total agreement. The more you can show community participation, and with this we had an open house, and I will have all the notes from those open house, if you don't already have them, that shows what people were thinking and so on. It's good to have numbers there. It's good to have approvals. It's good to have follow-up with community organizations and new activities. And the village needs to do a good job of documenting that, so that when you do go for that. The other thing besides that is community foundations are important ingredients to have where people can be will or something too, and sometimes it doesn't have to be discretionary where it goes, but those are a good means of doing that. I say that now because I'm on the community foundation board of the Land of Lincoln, and that's one of the purposes there is to have these funds that can be allocated by a third party basically, so that people can get the tax advantages and so on without. And it can go specifically for projects or generally for projects. So that might be something else you want to set up here in the community, is that kind of a fund that people could donate towards, with that idea that the dog park would be built after their death or maybe before that. So.
Chatham has been fairly progressive. I mean, especially years and years ago when Glenwood Lake went in, one of the first subdivisions to go in that has multiple lakes through it, has the sidewalks behind the house, so it kind of draws all the people that live in that area to use the sidewalks that are behind their houses so they can interact with their neighbors. That subdivision was ahead of its time. The streets, there isn't hardly a straight street in that subdivision, but it's a very, very nice subdivision set up that way. We need to try to get developers, as they come into town now, to start looking at different ways to develop subdivisions instead of saying, okay, I got 200 acres here and everything is cookie cutter because I can get 200 houses in that 200 acres.
Right.
They need to be able to make some of the areas around them greener and natural areas so that it needs to be that little bit different that will make Chatham stand out instead of everything just being boxed into place like it has been over the last few years.
I see this as beautification, and I think it's progressive. It's a progressive idea that does put us over the top a little bit. So I like it.
Any other questions for Mr. Massey?
Is there anything, Trustee Detmers, you wanted to discuss while he's here?
No, just I think Kent mentioned that, there's a centralization of parkland today with respect to our population. And I think that, by expanding that into different areas, we can service our constituents. Because I think it was 80% of our public land or something thereabouts is in community park, which is the least populated area of town. So.
I think from what you see in the appendix, that we were shifting things around and doing some things, and that was really like input from both Pat and Dustin as far as some of that. But then there are other people in the committee that do each year this instrumental
Yes.
not the term of forcing it.
Most of our parks are near floodplains because the property was the cheapest or somebody gave it to us.
Right. I think it's 25 or 21% of our.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's floodable areas. So.
Like you said, I wish it wasn't, but it is.
Yeah. Are there any changes that you guys thought were necessary or?
I thought it was good.
I think I'd like to point out with the changes thing, should be a living document, something that the Parks and Rec Committee should look at almost every year and edit.
See what they want to pursue too.
And make those appendixes, because that will help in grant writing. It wasn't something that was done and put on the shelf and then brought out 20 years later.
Like with the summer rec program, it has it where that committee would do an annual update and send it up to the village board. It almost seems like it would behoove us for, this to be included along with summer rec program for the comprehensive.
Public Properties Commission. Yep.
Yeah, the public properties to review this.
That group's definition needs edited anyway. I think it's a good idea.
All right.
Great. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, sir. Next on the agenda, update of the matrix report, Alan Pennington. Mr. Pennington?
I can talk loud.
Should be,
All right.
hopefully.
All right. Good evening. I'm going to give you a quick overview of the report and then answer any questions that you might have. Just start by a quick overview of what we were really looking at when we went through this. It included things including operational practices within the village, organizational structure, and staffing. And I want to put a little context on what we found initially in terms of where the village was. And so on one of the slides, I think there's some key strengths you need to keep in mind as you think about some of these recommendations. There is a pretty significant focus on customer responsiveness within the village in terms of how staff respond to the residents. That's good and it's bad, but it is a strength to keep in mind as you look at some of these recommendations. I think historically you've operated with fairly low staffing levels. So you have cross-utilized staff in a lot of ways and been somewhat reluctant to add new positions, financially conservative on that. You are getting to a point where you're probably not going to be able to do more with existing. And we've identified a few staffing changes, not a lot, but a few that we felt were the most critical ones. During the time the study's been going on, we had it on hiatus for a while the survey was out. The village hasn't sat still. They have made a lot of changes, some staffing changes specifically in the public works area and some other changes. As I mentioned, there was a lot of cross-utilization, well-trained and dedicated staff. So I think that's a real strength. The village has started to look at implementation of new technologies as a way to improve their operations. And you're appropriately charging back services to enterprise funds to reimburse for general fund expenditures. So that's good. All positive things we want to see. I think similar to the discussion you just had about looking to the future, when you look at the variety of recommendations in the report in the totality, I think what you're going to see is a few staffing recommendations in particular areas, but mainly additional ways you can put in place the processes or the practices that position you for future growth. Similar to the customer service manual you just talked about earlier, that's not something most communities have in place, especially a community of this size. So that's something you should feel proud of. You'll see a handful of recommendations in here where we're proposing some additional things you should do to ensure you have the information you need to make policy decisions. Staff knows how to account for and manage their services, and you're preparing for the future. So the first set of recommendations, we grouped these sort of in some broad areas. So the first group has to do with administration, permitting, and code enforcement. There's several recommendations in here about performance measures. It's not just in this area, but I just wanted to hit it one time. That's really something for each of the major departments. You should have a small handful of performance measures that they use to measure how well they're doing. That's something you should be getting periodically to know how well the village is operating overall. And it's sort of that early indicator. If you set the standard and we're starting to fall behind that, you start to look to say, is it a process issue? Is it a staffing issue? Developing and adopting a capital asset management policy. We have a fairly high priority on that because that is a large expenditure and you really need to look to the future, whether it's park acquisition, vehicle acquisitions, and plan that out so that you can best manage your finances in the long term. Relatively minor one, but we did recommend increasing the formal bidding procedure threshold to $25,000, increasing electronic transfer payments to reduce the number of checks issued, again, just an efficiency measure, conducting an annual employee survey to engage them, ensuring employee performance evaluations are completed on an annual basis, reviewing job descriptions every 3 to 4 years to keep them updated and accurate, looking at implementation of a case management system for code enforcement cases, expanding GIS, and I know in the time that we've been working with you, that has changed some. I noticed on your website you have a great layer to look at zoning, for example, so people can go in and put a parcel and see what that zoning is. There's a lot of ways you can use that to help expand the information you're providing to your residents or the services without a lot of staff resources. Providing more information about permitting on the website, applications, checklists, so developers know what to expect when they come into the village. We do have a recommendation that when permitting volumes increase, to transfer some staff to handle that workload. On an earlier draft, we were actually recommending that transfer more immediately. You know, the workload has changed, so it's something you really need to monitor because that is something that as people are coming in to develop, you need to move them through the process as quickly as possible to be competitive. Developing a longer range IT plan. As you continue to grow, you need to have a broader vision. I heard earlier you were talking about some of your systems and the ability to integrate them. But looking forward, each time you're looking at a software system is finding something that will either complement or integrate with what you have now, so you don't have competing demands for systems there. And again, expanding these performance measures across all of the entire organization. For Public Works, again, the key issues here had to do with some planning issues. So developing an asset management policy, really understanding what are the maintenance frequencies we're going to have on our key issues, because that really is what dictates your future staffing requirements. When do we need to replace them, so that you're looking at appropriate maintenance and replacement on your key facilities. Using a departmental committee to help develop that and the strategies. Developing a short-term and a long-term capital investment plan that's based upon the service levels you want to provide. And that's harder, because that's probably going to push some decisions to this board where you say, we want to maintain things at a certain level, but we don't have the finances for that. But it's better that you know that early where those demands or constraints are, so that you can prioritize. Longer term, we did recommend a potential half-time position as an asset coordinator. Utilizing a community survey to identify new recreational programming opportunities, so that you can expand those services. And at the point that you expand those, you would require likely some additional services, assuming you don't, or additional staffing, assuming you don't go the other approach you're talking about with a full-fledged park district. And with that recreation programming, having a policy about what your cost recovery is, so that you're setting the fees for those programs to cover the cost to provide the services. Generally, a guideline is anywhere from 40 to 60% cost recovery on recreational programs, depending upon the types of services you're providing. A few communities do much better than that. Some do worse, but it's not typical to cover all your costs from the programming fees. In the police area, we have recommended that you maintain a minimum of 2 sworn personnel per shift, and that can be done with full-time staff or overtime. If it's full-time staff, it would likely require 1 additional position for the staff that we had in place at the time. Adding 1 investigator. Some internal change of duties, assigning misdemeanor investigations to patrol. A fairly major issue, though, is continuing the discussion or exploring the consolidation of dispatch with Sangamon County. There's a lot of opportunities to reduce costs in that respect, and when we're suggesting if you do that 2 positions be maintained but converted to administrative positions within the organization. There is work that they are providing for other departments that you couldn't just say, hey, let's get rid of dispatch, it goes to the county, consolidated, and we don't need any of those positions. They are providing other support within the organization. From our estimate and discussions with staff, that's about half. So you would have a need for them, but it would be a different type of position. Establishing a formal police fleet replacement schedule, because that is one of your larger fleets. Making sure you have planned replacement of that. We've given you some suggested guidelines based upon national standards. Looking at the body-worn camera program, and longer term looking at a police facilities plan to plan the future for what you need. So, again, to kind of do a quick summary and then answer any questions you have, most of these are not issues where we found something that isn't appropriate. It's ways you can improve either the efficiency or effectiveness of staff, ensure you're spending your funds wisely in the future, but really planning for that future growth. What systems do we need to have in place as we continue to grow to be prepared for handling those services? Because if you continue on the growth you have, you're not going to stay, in the mid-teens in terms of population. It's going to continue to grow, and when that growth comes, they start demanding more and more services, whether it's recreational, higher maintenance of streets or infrastructure, and those are hard to accommodate if you have a plan for some of them. And I mean, just facility-wise, you don't have a lot of space for a lot of additional staff either, so you're going to have to take those longer perspectives of looking at what those future needs might be. So with that, I'll stop talking and answer any questions that you might have.
Quick question,
Sure.
on the draft of the plan, there's a column for time frame,
Yes.
and I noticed that was blank on the draft.
Yeah, so we had left it blank until we had received some feedback in terms of the type of aggressiveness or approach you might want to take. We typically would put a time frame to phase them in. Some of them are they're going to be to be determined, such as if you increase recreation program, that position would be at that point in time, so it would be tied with that decision. The other ones, like implementing the policies, we typically would stretch those out over a 2 to 3 year period, because you have to understand that they take time to develop, and take staff time to develop them, to review them with you, and you can't, if you say, hey, we want all these are important, we want them all done, next year, it's probably not going to happen, and you're going to be disappointed. So with that perspective, we would phase them out over several years to sort of prioritizing which are most critical. Likely, we would put the capital investment plan first, then asset management plan, and then some of the other longer term plans.
Well, the recreation one's timely, especially following the last presentation, and concerns about bandwidth of staff with this whole plan.
Well, and I'll say it again. I mean, staff are playing multiple roles here, and they're switching hats in what they're doing, and that's served you well. But you're at a point where you can only throw one more additional duty on before something's going to give, and that's why we're trying to be careful about making it too aggressive.
Well, I appreciate that perspective and overall view, because there's an old saying, if you chase two rabbits, both will escape. And that's been my concern as a quickly growing village, that it could be done, but as time goes on, if you got the rabbits close, maybe you can, but as we've expanded so much, that's my concern, and how to manage that, how to staff that, so we have the appropriate resources and staff to do it efficiently.
Yeah, and the reason we would sort of recommend the capital program and then the asset management program is because those are the two things that give you the long-term vision of what are you going to be investing in, and then what are we going to need to maintain. So with the asset management program, you actually define all of the key maintenance activities you're going to provide, and it gives you a real clear picture of that here's the staffing requirements, because you typically put, for example, street sweeping, you would put a frequency. How often do we want to do that? How long does it typically take? You multiply those together, the staff hours that are required. You say, hey, we can't afford that many staff. We have to reduce the service level. Public says, no, we don't want to reduce the service levels, and we need to find some way to pay for the staff. If it allows you that ability to tie your service levels to your staffing in a much nicer way, because you have some data to support it, and you're really focusing on those service levels, rather than reacting and say, yeah, everyone wants their street swept once a month. But if we put all our resources there, we're not patching potholes, we're not doing other infrastructure maintenance that's important.
I'd like to make a comment. After we got the draft, I gave it to all my staff and had them go through and take a look at the recommendations and read through it. And every one of them wrote down things on the areas that they worked in. Now, I think if you stop and think about it, you feel like someone came in and critiqued how you do your job. And everybody took a defensive posture to it. Well, we're already doing this, and we're doing this, and we're doing this. And after I got all their comments and started looking at them, and I wasn't the same way when I went through it the first time, I had looked at it and said, we're doing this, we're doing this. Does this make us look bad? But then I got to thinking, these are all good ideas on what you should be doing. We were doing a lot of that. We didn't have everything done, but we were doing a lot of it, and we're on the path to getting it done. And that's when I gave you guys all of our comments so that you could at least see them. But really, in reality, Alan was dealt a tough hand with starting this and then put on hold for 2 years. If he came in tomorrow and interviewed us all, this would be essentially the same. The only thing that's different is we'd be a little bit farther down the path. So that's why I had him come tonight and present this, because everything that's in here is a good idea and a good game plan to be able to aim for in the future. And we're on that path now. So that's, I just wanted to say that.
That's how I took it as well, actually,
Yeah.
because, I would love for somebody to come to my job and tell me what things I should be working on, because then it kind of takes, that stress off of you guys, and you could use these in your performance evaluations to say, hey, look, we wanted to do X, Y, and Z, and let's get halfway there this year. Did we do it or not? And I think that's exactly how this should be taken, and not that this is out of date or anything, but we can keep this as a living document and continue to make efforts towards these ends, and add new things as they come up or as we recognize them or our priorities change.
And performance metrics would only help you as a manager too.
Yeah.
Are they meeting what they should be meeting every month, week, or whatever it should be? I know it was my job as a middleman. I always had to produce a weekly report of what was going on.
Are many cities, of like size, doing that, not doing that, trying to do it? What's
I think more and more are trying to implement it.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to give you a big caution here. Don't go overboard on performance metrics. For each department, identify 4 or 5 key metrics that you want to measure. So whether that's response time, a frequency of a service, a responsiveness to a customer complaint, but choose 4 or 5 that are meaningful to you, that help you understand if things are going along the right trajectory. If you make it too complicated, and I've seen some organizations do this, you hire a staff person to do performance reports, and that's all they do full time. And that's great, lots of great data, but it's a lot of resources for not the output. So I say fewer measures are better if they're quality ones that tell you something. If it's not telling you, if you can't look at it as a board and make decisions on how your village is performing, then it's not a useful measure, and you don't need your staff collecting it or measuring. So I would just give you that one caution: keep it short, sweet. What are key things that help us know how well we're doing? And that's the best way to move forward.
And do they usually ask the staff to come up with those measures?
So usually staff develop them, and through whatever process for approval you would have internally, whether that's you want to discuss them collectively or if they work with Pat to develop them. But it's usually a staff-driven effort. It's usually presented. If there are real key ones, you can put it on your website. It's a great way to keep the public informed, because quite honestly, a lot of times residents don't know all the services you're providing or the service levels that you're providing. So it's a great way for you to communicate everything you're doing and how well you're doing and get some positive feedback.
And our work order system that we have has all that reporting and has all those built-in reports. But the thing with our staff, if a work order comes in the electric department, the guy that does the work orders sees it and goes and does it that day. I mean, we stay right up there. The only thing that we fell behind for a long time was meter replacements. It took a long time to get them in, and it's very, very hard that people that have meters inside their house to contact with them to be able to schedule that you can meet them to go in there and change that one out. So that's why we changed the policy that going forward, we're going to try to put all the meters outside. We might have to temporarily update one in the house if the thing quit working until the weather warms up and we can start putting the pits back out front. But that's all there. Vern has a system that monitors his police and how many calls they go on and everything like that. And then Sherry is implementing that opengov.com, which will have all of our financials and all of our bills and everything else. And that will be available online for you guys to view and look at where we're at budget-wise with every single one of those. So that's all stuff that's important. We know it, and we're starting to do it. We're just not quite always there yet.
It's going to take time.
Yeah.
It's a priority. That's why I say you have to prioritize these things. And it's one step forward to putting you in a better position for the future. That's how I view a review like this is how do we continue to make that progress? And it gives you a chance to prioritize which of these are maybe most important.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Any more questions for Mr. Pennington?
So I guess our next step is we will put the our suggested priorities on there. But I think more importantly is you figure out internally what your priorities for those are and use that as a way to measure moving forward.
That would be great.
So we want him to move forward, finalize the report, and then send it to us then? We don't, do you think you need him back one more time for the final, or you got an idea now?
I think it's a good plan and comprehensive. I like the idea of preparing for growth because that'll facilitate these plans. Moving forward, we'll be able to achieve a lot of these goals just through growing. And so I feel good about it right now.
All right, so let's get the final in. I'll distribute it to you guys. You take a look at it. If there's any questions, I can submit those to him, and we can try to get those answered before, if we need to change anything at the very last minute.
All right.
All right?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. New business, CMT engineering updates.
Jim had nothing. I know you wanted me to ask last night about chloramines. Dustin got a hold of Bill Brown. He had heard possibly the end of the month here in February, but
This February? Would be great.
we're all frustrated.
Agree.
I mean,
Agree.
I can't defend the incompetence anymore.
Okay, the village manager update then?
I think you've been updated enough after the parks and the matrix comprehensive plan.
Okay.
Other than that, everything else has been going pretty smooth. We still have a few MFT programs. We need to be able to do the spruce thing, and we're still going to try to get the Glenwood Lake tube in sometime before spring, but we had the money in the budget for both of those, and they're both planned. They're just waiting for
Weather.
a few days of 50-degree weather, so.
Okay. Public Property and Recreation Committee discussion.
We haven't met since our last meeting here. Obviously, we received some concerns with respect to the dog park location, so I shared that with the chairman of the Utilities Commission, or Public Properties Commission, and I'm sure we'll discuss it at the next meeting as well. That was the only thing.
Thank you. Utility Oversight Committee discussion. So last night we did have the discussion, like we talked about earlier, what Pat said, the chloramines, and then now we have South Sangamon. There's a piece of, there's information here for you guys to look at. South Sangamon Water Commission is wanting us to amend our intergovernmental agreement with them.
We had an intergovernmental agreement, the New Berlin Chatham, to issue the bonds for the water plant and the distribution line. They are in the process of refinancing those to be able to lower the interest cost. It doesn't say in the current bonds that they're required to come back and ask us for our approval for them to refinance, but they still want to be able to do that. So if you look at the email in front of you, there's one there explaining.
So we had discussion last night, and, you know, we didn't have some of the answers, so we asked Pat to get them, because the numbers just didn't add up. And we knew that one of the bonds was paid off. We weren't sure which. And then what are we doing? Are we pushing? So we know that the water rates were set to ramp up because we're going to start seeing higher payments that we have to pay. And so they are looking to refinance, and it said for 31 million of not to exceed 31 million last night. When if you totaled all the bonds, it was 31,700,000 thousand. And then we were under the impression that one of the bonds was expired in 2020. I got some information that I passed out to all of you guys, which is this sheet. One of the bonds did expire. It was the 2010D serial revenue bond. And then we have another bond, which is 5 million something, that expires in 2032. So the couple questions I'd like for our lawyers to look into is, one, what if we say no? Can they just go ahead and do it? Two, would this bond, is there any penalty for paying these bonds off early? Sometimes there are, penalties. I don't see anything in here that they've explained. 3, while we're getting their financial, take on this, their financial take was also that this was going to cost 20 million to build. So if we could look at it independently ourselves as well to make sure that these numbers on the sheet are correct. Because there's some things, effects of changes of credit enhancement expenses, that I don't understand what that would be, if we could get a definition of that. And then their explanation for saying no more than 31 million, but they think the estimated principal amount is 27,845. Why wouldn't we just have an agreement 27,845? The reason for putting 31, it's common because they use higher not to exceed number in preliminary ordinances, so it doesn't have to repeat the preliminary steps if the final actual amount is greater. So when you're looking at the principal, you're not looking at any interest. The principal shouldn't fluctuate. The principal should be what the principal is at the date that the bonds are issued. So I would hope they'd have a more firm number than being 3 or 4 million high, and then we get caught with 31 million. They issue the bonds, well, you guys agreed to it. It's not that, it's just the history isn't there for us to have that trust, so to speak, so it'd be better. And then Ryan, last night, kind of brought up that he would like to ask them to drop 6 and 7, but I know that's a pipe dream. 6 and 7 tie them to our taxes, so I know they're not going to change that.
But I would like our lawyers to look into that, please.
So our lawyers have this document too, and it kind of shows the schedule of the bonds and the payment history and that. So if you could compare the two documents and see if this is
The other question,
viable.
I wanted to add another one.
Yeah.
So the other question I had asked last night, so when we had our utility meeting out there in December, when they started talking about the refinance, it was going to be to prevent the ramp up, is going to be a savings of 4 million. And in the email, you see it, the lawyer says conservatively 2 million. And that it's still, and so that's being presented to us, and that prevents any ramp up now that was scheduled.
Well, now it's back to 3.3 million.
Oh, it's back up to 3. So, but, depending on when this is finalized, if it's finalized, whatever the market is doing that day, let's say it bottoms out, I don't know, but my question would be then, what's the amount they would need to save for us to not have a ramp up? So if it ends up being only a savings of 500,000, does that mean it would still need to ramp up then, or that's what they would need? Yeah. And I think that helps answer the other. It's an addendum to the other questions, but it helped clarifies what is going on here.
So, and the other question would be, what bonds exactly make up the 27,845? Because the one bond was set to expire in 2032, and now if that's part of that, now we're pushing that back to 2041. Ultimately, we could still see savings of 3 million, which if you're going to spend 30,000 to save 3 million, you save 3 million. It makes sense. It'd be good to have better numbers. Even the response tonight really just doesn't add up. The numbers may be absolutely correct. It's just you can't see what makes those numbers up. It'd be good for us as a board to be more informed.
Right, and these were, I believe this was finalized yesterday. Yesterday, it was sent out to us yesterday afternoon, so
right.
We haven't had a time. Mike and I haven't had a time to talk about it yet, so I know that I wanted the board to see it, and we're going to schedule a time sometime this week to discuss it.
Does anybody else, I know we just got these tonight, we kind of looked over this last night, but now these numbers have completely changed from last night. Thank you for getting a clarification, Pat. So that's the other concern is we get this explanation why you need to do this, and then Pat asked for clarification, and now the numbers are all different. It'd be nice if things added up, and there could be a reasonable explanation for all of it, but
the numbers are all they're different, but it does make more sense as to what is going on, because this is basically it's a not to exceed bid, right? So they're going out for bid on the bonds, the not to exceed the 31 million. because of the unknown fluctuation between now and when the bid is closed, they're asking for the 31. That's my assumption, but we don't know that. Nothing in this says that that's what they're doing.
The only thing that'll change the principal amount between now and then would be a payment, and you know exactly what that payment's going to be. So they should be able to lock down a principal amount. Now, I agree, our savings numbers are going to be all over the board depending on when we lock in. So it could be 1 million, 4 million, it just depends on the market. But the principal should not change, except because we know what our payment is currently under the current contract or current bonds. So it would be good to lock in a price, because I just don't feel comfortable with giving them authority to do 31 million and they need 27.8. Even if it's a common practice, I just don't feel comfortable with, and even though we have more say now, on the board, and that it's just protecting everybody would be better to have that number locked down.
My only piece so far, again, some of us are just learning about the details here, but is just, I would caution folks about saying that this modification would prevent future rate increases, because
Correct.
we have no idea what's,
Correct.
I mean, if half the customers leave, then there definitely will be an increase in.
And I think Trustee Churchill was saying that we've heard about this ramp up, customer base stays the same. They had a ramp up, and when he asked the question out there, they said the ramp up wouldn't occur. Doesn't mean that rates wouldn't increase.
That's on the theory
Good
that
point.
all things being the same, they're saying this is a good move because it would be, even if all things are the same, they would still have to increase our water rates today for us in the future.
Right.
But,
And this
with
could help
these
offset
savings,
that, or
this would offset that
take a
if
chunk
all
out.
things were the same, that those water rate increases would not have to occur. But yes, there's so many factors and variables that would change.
So my concern then becomes as well, does the so-called ramp up that exists now as we have the bonds, does it just move that down the road?
No.
Okay.
From what I understand.
It makes it go like.
You have level payments. If you look at that one sheet.
Right.
you'll have level
The payments do appear to be,
through the remainder of the years of the contract.
And obviously, our ability to make those payments is dependent upon the number of customers and the cost of doing business. So
well,
our effective rate as a consumer could change often based on how efficient the plant is or how many customers there are.
well,
Even if we have a
Because
fixed,
over the last few years, they've just started to be able to become profitable. Okay, and things have been replaced and things have been fixed. If the bonds ramped up, we were going to have to raise the rates to be able to cover the rate of the bonds going up.
correct.
If that doesn't happen, that's one factor of taking out a rate increase. If something breaks,
Sure.
or we need to expand the plant, say something came into Marvin, and they were going to be able to buy 100,000 gallons or 200,000 gallons from us a day, we needed to be able to expand that capacity. We probably have to raise rates for a while to be able to pay for that to go into place. But you're hoping that that customer that comes in and is going to buy that pays for all the rate or allows it to drop back over the future and stuff like that. So you cannot say by doing this, you're going to.
Rates will not.
raise rates.
right, but I've just heard it a few
Agreed.
times. That's all I'm saying is that I
Yeah.
think as this board, we should be cautious of saying things like that without 8,000 asterisks.
The other,
I think it should be said, and we know our rates are already at a really high level.
Right.
And we want to see every effort made to at least maintain and not increase, because we know that.
Yep, absolutely. And when you look at these schedules of, our existing bond costs with respect to principal and interest and total amount due, it definitely increases as time goes on, so.
well, but
if
it
our
does
expenses go
increase in the new one too. It's just not as much. So what's weird is some year that.
Right, from 1.8 to 2.
Right, and then like in 2031, it's 2,035,000, and 2032, it's 2,036,000, and then 2033, it goes back to 2035. I don't know why we go down, up, down.
I think it's based off of you're paying off those old bonds.
Right.
And those get paid off in certain years. And as you get towards the end, those numbers start to drop, what you have to pay.
2041 is going to be a great year, cuts in half. We go to 1 million.
I won't have to worry about it.
So that, if we could just get clarification.
Yeah, I'll
And,
set up-
and what makes up the 27,845, the principle shouldn't change. I wouldn't be comfortable passing something up to 31.
Okay.
We'd like to see something that's more, and then work with them and go forward. But yeah, if we could get, the numbers do add up, like Trustee Mann said, better tonight than they looked last night,
Better, but it's still not.
but they're different.
Yeah, right.
How can they change in one day?
Well, because
Well, one was just an estimate.
Right.
31 million.
they were
And when
estimating,
we asked them, we said, well, what's the deal? Is 31 million, does that include a, you know, a $4 million storage tank out there? And he said, no, you have to set that number high. The way that Mike explained it to me, you have to set that number high because you're gonna go through all this paperwork and get everything ready to go. And if you walk in and for some reason that thing fluctuates,
what fluctuates? The principal doesn't fluctuate.
Yes.
You may have made a payment which would make it go down.
Unless it's just back to our discussion last night, an ability for them to have more.
So I would,
Income.
but he told me, he says, Pat, they're not trying to borrow any more money. They're not trying to borrow any more money. That is not what the idea of this is. The only idea of this whole thing is to get a lower interest rate.
the only thing that's going to happen is it'll go down. If you pay principal, it'll go down. It's not, so if we did up to 27,840, we should be well within it too, because,
Brett, that sounds the logical thing to me
Yeah.
too. But I am not
Agreed.
up on council.
so Greg, if you could find
I
out.
will ask him why.
Greg could
Specifies-
play one on TV.
Yes.
He is already council, but I don't think any of the rest of us can.
Agreed. And that's why I'm asking Greg if you could get us answers, and then what that expense is, that $4 million expense.
Yeah, I'll ask him all those things, everything.
And even if we spend $4 million, which we would have been saving $7 million, you're still saving $3 million. It'd still be worth it if that's in fact the case.
Yeah.
If we just get more transparent numbers, it would be better to talk through. So that's what we discussed.
Or somebody that can come and explain it better.
Or me, or any of us agree, because we
Yeah.
can't get this one wrong. We've got to have the most information we can before we look to do this kind of movement. But it's not saying that these numbers are wrong, they just look different, and if we can get them explained, that'd be great. Any other?
We'll send
Comments or
the
anything?
approval back with the chloramines.
That's what I said. That's what I said. We'll sign this when,
Yeah.
we'll look to sign it when we get chloramine, and you take out 6 and 7.
Or does it even matter whether we sign it or not?
So then that was the other thing is, do they even need us? So I would hope they would.
I believe they do,
Okay.
but I'll confirm.
All right, thank you. The other thing we discussed, there was something on the social media where somebody had discussed a meter. I talked to Pat, they investigated it. The citizen hadn't called the village office. I apologize.
All right now.
So they hadn't called the village office, and we kind of re-stressed the importance. If you have an issue, please bring it to their attention, because if they don't know about it, they can't deal with it. They found what the reason was fairly quickly. Dustin, there was a problem with the reading of the meters. When they put they replaced an old one and put a new one in, and a 0 from the reader got added to it. Is that correct?
It was on the manual part. It
Yeah.
wasn't the electronic read.
On the
electronic read
manual.
wouldn't have messed it up, but the guy, when he looked down and looked at it, he was one of the newer water guys, and he put a 0 on the end.
It was just a reading on the old meter. It wasn't the new meter.
Correct. So Pat has been in contact with that citizen, and they're okay?
It's all worked out, yeah.
Okay.
But please, call the village. We have people here to answer these calls and take care of it. We take care of it right away.
I would agree. Every time I've asked Pat for an answer, they get it fairly quickly.
Don't drive yourself into aggravation by going to social media and trying to have your neighbors help you figure out a problem that we're all getting paid to solve for you. So
You should call here. If you want to go to social media, go to social media, but you should at least call here as well, just to give them an opportunity to fix the problem. And that's pretty much the discussion last night.
I'm glad that was worked out. I mean, because that looked like a complete disaster. So,
didn't need to be.
yeah.
Okay, discussions on modifications to 111.17 outdoor cafe permit, 10 p.m. entertainment curfew, and exit entry gates. That's been put on here by mistake.
You're going to have to address that.
It should go through the planning commission first.
Planning commission first. But what we've got is we have cafe license, and the thing was probably written 25, 30 years ago. It doesn't meet up with what new beer gardens and cafe areas. So we want you guys to be able to take a look at proposed changes to those so that it works. Because we started out, we had none, but I think our first one was, well, AJ's always had that fenced little area, but I don't think anybody ever considered that a beer garden.
Right.
But they do now. The Creek has the outside seating. The pizza place over here, Why Not, has an outside seating area. Sun Tai has an outside seating area. The Alamo has an outside seating area. And now next door. So we need to upgrade our rules and regulations for that. So we'll take it in front of the planning commission, get them their blessing, and when we get that blessing, then we'll bring it back to this board.
Thank you.
The one other question that I had was, we have a gentleman that is applying for a liquor license for Spartan Sports Park. The license before was in Christophilakis' name.
That's what I was saying. Didn't it already have liquor?
They are leasing the park now to 2 or 3 other guys. So they want to get the liquor license in their name instead of in the Christophilakis'.
So it's not a new license. It's not adding.
It's not adding any licenses. It's just we would go through the process to turn around and have this person.
Sounds like a transfer.
See any problem with that? Because
It's just a
he's
rename.
filled out the background, he's passed the background check, but Greg, we need to have an ordinance.
Right, and the way it would work, because our ordinance prohibit transferring, is.
So we'll add a
cancel
license
one.
and cancel
Well,
one. Cancel first?
Yeah, we cancel and then add at the same meeting. They'd still, the new licensee would need to fill out the application, but we do it all at once. That way, we don't have a vacant license there.
But I wanted to give you a heads up, because we'll probably have that as an ordinance at the next meeting to be able to switch that.
The other question I had, and it's for you, Pat, brought up to me by a constituent, is what is the rule for gaming? They've got to be 50-some%, either food or alcohol? What is it? 60% food or alcohol? They kind of pointed out that the place in County Market that's on the Elsa's is
I can't.
almost all gaming. How do we confirm that people are 60%?
We have never done that.
Okay.
Now, we can start, but we need to be able to say that we're doing it for everyone.
Across the
and
board.
not just
Absolutely, you couldn't discriminate. I would agree.
But we need to. I mean, one, those rules are in place for a reason. The other thing, that was presented to us
As a sushi bar.
As a board, it's
sushi
a
restaurant,
bar.
and so that was misrepresented to us.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I know in the past, when you have things on the books, but you never follow through with them, that John Meyer said sometimes it'd be good for the board to come back and reaffirm that, hey, on starting June 1st, we want them to be able to turn all their numbers in and see what their receipts are. So if we could maybe have an ordinance written.
Or a resolution.
Or a resolution or something
Reaffirming.
saying that, that we need to start enforcing this and we want to do it by these measures and stuff like that.
Maybe they just,
Everybody is aware that, starting on this day.
they provide their yearly number.
Yep.
Whatever they turn in for tax, I mean, it would show their revenues and the breakdown.
Could we have that the next meeting?
That's,
And then if it kicks out 20 games, we, as a board, may have to look and see what to do, but I
well,
don't,
if it meets our rules, then fine, but
Yeah.
it's certainly, that
Agree.
is the exact business model that we were trying to prevent.
right.
And that person was told exactly what the rules
Right.
were.
Yes, they were. Okay,
But
thank
they may
you.
not be the only ones that are not meeting the specifications.
Would agree. Public comments on village business? Did we have any? All right. Scheduled meetings, committee of the whole, be 6:15 Municipal Hall, February 11th, 2020. We have any reason for a closed session? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
Trustee Churchill, second by trustee Charo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you.